Hello everybody, my name is Ramiz Ali. I am a university teacher who has been working in higher education for a bit of time, mainly in the area of online education and distance education. Currently, I am a PhD candidate at the University of Wollongong, Australia. Today, I am going to present to you a small portion of my PhD study, which is about it. This integration is often facilitated through a learning management system like Moodle. The combination can be the integration of online lectures with subsequent in-class tutorials or vice versa, or sometimes it can be a bit of both. Regardless of the method of the integration, the overall aim is to provide students with advantages of face-to-face interactions and affordances of digital technology. Now, why do we care about blended learning? Literature shows that blended learning can provide students with multiple affordances. It can allow people who live at remote locations to participate in university learning without attending daily face-to-face classes. It can also provide people with flexibility by letting them study in while having full-time employment or any other busy schedules. Blended learning also typically involves various types of synchronous and asynchronous learning activities, which means more avenues for learner engagement. Because of this increased engagement, learners can perform better compared to fully online or fully face-to-face teaching alone. Therefore, blended learning has been perceived as a promising mode of course delivery in the recent years. However, adoption of blended learning may not be straightforward, and the literature suggests that application of blended learning can be inconsistent due to several reasons, especially barriers encountered by teachers. Therefore, this research explores the barriers encountered by teachers in relation to adoption and implementation of blended learning at a university level. For this research, here I am asking two research questions. Number one, what are the teachers' overall perceptions of using blended learning? The second research question is, what are the barriers encountered by university teachers in using blended learning? For this study, a case study method was used. Case study method is appropriate for this study because the aim of the study is describing teacher perceptions about blended learning and understanding their overall challenges that they face in using blended learning in a specific context. In terms of the research context, this study was conducted at the Maldives National University in the Maldives. The Maldives is a small island nation where higher education is quite centralized in the city. Our islands are very dispersed and separated by sea. We don't have a regular public transport system for traveling between the islands. So it is nearly impossible for people who live in the islands to attend regular classes held on campus. In terms of the university, the Maldives National University is the biggest higher education provider with 9 faculties and around 9,000 enrolled students every year. In 2019, blended learning was officially adopted by the university to use as the official mode of course delivery for their flexible courses. In terms of the research participants, 24 university teachers participated in this study from various faculties. It included education, business, health sciences, nursing, hospitality and tourism studies, science and engineering, Islamic studies and law, and liberal arts. Of the 24 teachers, nearly 62% had less than 2 years of blended teaching experience at the time of data collection. For data collection, semi-structured interviews were used. The questions were focused to explore teachers' perceptions about blended learning and to explore in-depth details about the barriers they face in relation to using blended learning. All the interviews were audio recorded for transcription purposes. In addition to the interviews, several policies and guidelines related to blended learning implementations were gathered and analyzed. For data analysis, thematic analysis was administered by using FLIX approach, which means use of open coding, Excel coding, and selective coding methods. Open coding breaks down the interview content to small chunks, whereas Excel coding is helpful to relate coded subcategories to their respective core concepts and categories. And finally, the selective coding helps to look for further evidence that are related to the main themes. For coding, interview transcriptions were read carefully and NVivo was used to break down the content into subcodes and to identify and match the emergent patterns and themes, and finally to identify codes that represented the main themes. For documents, content analysis was performed and relevant content were linked to their respective themes emerged from the thematic analysis. Now, let's talk about the results. Results showed overall teachers had positive perceptions about digital technology in education, specifically blended learning. In general, teachers believe that blended learning can provide their students with advantages, such as access in education while they live on remote islands with their families. Especially given the contextual situations such as the geographical dispersion of the nation, the teachers think that it would be very difficult for their students to participate in university education without blended learning. Therefore, overall, teachers were happy to use blended learning in their teaching. In terms of the challenges, despite teachers were generally happy about blended learning, there are several vocal teachers who had relatively negative beliefs and attitude about blended learning, and one of the such attitude is resistance. Some of the teachers mentioned that they use blended learning because of the university's direct instructions rather than their voluntary use. Some of them used expressions such as, "the university is forcing us and we are taught to use." These things indicate that if they had the choice, teachers would likely revert to their previous practice, which is definitely traditional face-to-face teaching. Another challenge that teachers encountered was teacher low self-efficacy. Many teachers believed that at the time of blended learning implementation, they did not have enough knowledge and technical skills required for blended learning, especially in relation to handling the online component of blended learning. Therefore, many teachers were depending on their colleagues to prepare online learning materials and even set in a course page in Moodle. The third significant issue emerged from the analysis was the increased teacher workload. Teachers believed that blended learning adds up so much work to their regular teaching work. For example, providing online learning materials, providing online feedback for students' weekly tasks, and even spending so much energy and time to learn new technology that are related to blended learning teaching. Therefore, overall, the workload of blended learning was perceived as much higher than regular face-to-face teaching. The fourth issue, perhaps a key problem to many other challenges that teachers face, are issues related to policies. In relation to policies, there are three things emerged. Number one, the university did not have a clear written strategy or policy direction for blended learning implementation. Because of that, there were issues such as communications and course delivery inconsistency issues between the faculties. Another issue was related to the study load offered by the university for blended learning students. It was the university's decision to offer full-time study load for this particular student cohort, even though almost all of the students were full-time employed. Therefore, it was a bit of struggle for students to study effectively while they were full-time employed. The third issue in relation to policy was the university's decision to have really intensive classes for blended courses, which means face-to-face classes are really intensive for these students. Face-to-face classes are typically held during the weekends, starting from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, of course with very short breaks. However, the intensity was too high and both students and teachers get really exhausted, even at the end of the first day. Finally, the fifth challenge was lack of readiness. Teachers generally believed that university wasn't fully prepared for institution-wide blended learning. The technological infrastructure, specifically issues related to internet, was huge. Also, many teachers believe that both teaching and support staff were not trained for blended learning at the time of implementation. So, based on the findings of this study, I can say that overall, teachers believe that blended learning provides with advantages such as increased access to learning, increased flexibility, and sometimes enhanced learner engagement. Therefore, in general, they were happy about using blended learning, despite some teachers had negative beliefs and attitudes. However, teachers faced several challenges that negatively impact on their use of blended learning. These challenges include high teacher resistance, low teacher self-efficacy, increased teacher workload, policy issues, and lack of institutional readiness. So, what are the implications of these findings for the practice of blended learning? There are two implications actually. Number one, blended learning is a good mode of course delivery to reach people who live at remote locations, specifically in the nations such as the Maldives, and it is likely that teachers will accept it because of the affordances of blended learning. The second major implication is university leaders should create necessary policies and guidelines to facilitate technology integrated learning, so the overall readiness of the universities can be increased and the teachers can be provided with both pedagogical and technical support that they need to use blended learning. I think that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much everybody for listening to my presentation. I am happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you.